I can hardly believe it. We are already just about 1/4 of the way through 2025. Frankly, who let time run this quickly, and I want to speak to their manager. So we're bringing back this kind of video where I talk a little bit about some of the albums that I've been listening to that I haven't really had much of a chance to either talk about yet, but I still kind of want to flesh out my thoughts on them even if I don't get the chance to do a full review. I don't want them to sort of get left by the wayside. So with that in mind, I have selected 10 picks from the last 3 months that I feel are still worth talking about. Now, in a buck from tradition, this isn't necessarily going to be singing the praises of all of these albums, because some of these have actually been a little bit disappointing to me, and I will get to the reasons why in due course. With that being said, let's get straight into things in alphabetical order. Am I in trouble? You know, this is something I often find myself asking in sort of certain parts of my life, but rarely have I ever asked this question when it comes to music. Thankfully, however, Am I in Trouble's debut album of Spectrum, I will happily say that they are most assuredly not in trouble. They have passed with flying colours, which is appropriate given the fact that every single song on the album is named after a colour. Now, this was the very first album of 2025 that I actually listened to. It came out way back on like the 3rd of January, I think it was, and it's taken me a hot minute to actually talk about this. It's been on the docket for a little while to actually discuss this record. So, what is this? Basically, it's black metal, but that's not really doing it full justice, let's be real here. This is black metal with a little bit of spice, a little bit of flavour, a lot more character than you might expect from the typical wintry, doomy, dirgy sort of stuff that you would kind of often associate with the genre. This honestly in some ways owes a lot in similarity theme-wise to the Deer Hunter's colour spectrum, insofar that every single song feels like it attributes itself to the particular styles and thoughts that you might associate with that particular colour. This one's a great time. It's really, really fun. It's not here for a particularly long time. It's just over half an hour long. So in all honesty, there's not really much of an excuse to not check this one out. There's some incredibly good riffing on this one. The vocals are tight, the production's really good, and I predict really good things from Am I in Trouble in the future. Do check it out, guys. I think if you're really into black metal, especially experimental black metal, you'll have a fantastic time with this one. Avantasia's Here Be Dragons. Now, for those of you who remember watching videos earlier on this year, this was one of my more anticipated records of the year. And it is unfortunate then that I have to report that my anticipation was somewhat misguided. You see, Avantasia's got this really annoying habit of releasing a great record, then a mid-record, then a great record, then a mid-record, and so on and so forth. Now, I was very favourable to the record that came before this. I believe it was about 2 years ago. Correct me if I'm wrong. So, obviously, I was a little bit hesitant to set too much expectation on this one, given that, you know, the trend that Avantasia tends to go through. But unfortunately, Here Be Dragons it's fine. It is a collection of fine songs. But that being said, that's not really good enough, is it? I mean, Tobias Sammet has got a good pedigree behind him. He has a good track record with these albums. When they're good, they're really good. I mean, The Scarecrow, still one of my absolute favourite metal albums, probably ever. And I don't know, there was something about Here Be Dragons that I just found bland. It just wasn't that interesting. The songs didn't really grab me. The guest features from the vocalist didn't really stick, and there was nothing I could really say on this album really did anything much for me. Don't get me wrong, this isn't a completely terrible album. There's still some fun moments to be found here and there, sure, but the honest and brutal truth of this is I would much rather be listening to almost any other Avantasia album apart from this one. It's just very milquetoast, it's just not grabbing me, and it's such a damn shame. Coheed and Cambria's Vaxis 3, The Father of Make-Believe. Now, okay, the Vaxis albums, certainly the first two Vaxis albums, have had a little bit of a mixed reception from the Coheed fandom, as it were, but I very much fall on the favourable side of these things. Yes, Vaxis 1 and Vaxis 2 had their problems, the first being insofar as that it was ridiculously overlong, bloated to the point of absurdity, and the second one being so stripped down and kind of bare bones compared to the complexities we usually associate with Coheed and Cambria, that it almost didn't feel like a Coheed record at all. That being said, I still found a lot of value in both of them. There was still a lot of fun to be had, and the narrative managed to propel itself forward in a way that only Claudio Sanchez is capable of. So Vax's 3 is here, the father of make-believe, and honestly I think this just about strikes the balance perfectly between the two Vax's albums that came prior to this. It's just about the right length, the complexity is back, there's plenty of callbacks. I mean, this is a fantastic fan service right at the very end of the album. You know, this is one of these if you know situations. But there's a lot going on here that I found really super engaging. I think the riffs are on fire, the choruses are spectacular, the production kind of lets it down a little bit. It feels a bit flat and kind of annoying to listen to at times just from a production standpoint. But the songwriting, the structuring, the narrative of everything, I think this is a fantastic way to close off the Vax's trilogy, if in fact it is going to just be a trilogy. And I do feel that this was a brilliant return to something more interesting and creative than Vax's 2. Although I still did kind of like that. Dr. Mocha Constant Current Stimulus. This is one that dropped into my promo inbox a little while back, and I was intrigued by the sort of blurb about it. If you're familiar with early Porcupine Tree, then Constant Current Stimulus is going to strike some serious nostalgia chords for you. There is something so incredibly familiar about the fuzzy, groovy kind of feeling going on here. It's got that real kind of up the down stair feel to it. It's kind of like old school and retro, and it just grooves really hard. I've had a great time with this one. Constant Current Stimulus has been on a kind of fairly regular rotation for me, and I've been getting a lot out of it every single time I spin it. There's a couple of moments that don't quite land as hard for me, like there's a really kind of aggressive midsection part throughout the album, which I don't think lands very well, and some of the transitions into other parts of songs are a little bit stilted and clunky. That being said, though, if you do enjoy that kind of old school Porcupine Tree sound from the very early days, this is going to strike such a chord with you, and I think you will have an enormously good time listening to this album. Havukruunu and Tavastland. Yeah, okay, I know I've definitely pronounced that incorrectly. I have some Finnish friends who are probably just going to laugh at any of my attempts to pronounce anything on this album, so I'm not mentioning a single word about how any of the track names are pronounced. That being said, Havukruunu are back. They kicked my ass with their previous record that came out a few years ago. I absolutely loved it, so I was quite looking forward to this one. I found out it was coming out. So who are these guys and what kind of thing can you expect? This is really guitar-centric. This is very kind of like epic, kind of folksy black metal. It's got a real kind of fighting against the oncoming darkness feel to it. You know, it feels heroic in places, but it also feels oppressive, dank and scary. And the riff is king. The riffs on this album are just absolutely throw the horns up, super memorable, super enjoyable. I adore this. This is such a fun album for me, but it does feel a little bit weird to give the descriptor of fun to something so dank and oppressive as this album. It's a great time. If you value guitar work above anything else, I think you will have an enormous amount of fun listening to this. It's about an hour or so in length, but for me, it just flies by. The entire record feels so well constructed, so well put together. It's just such a treat to listen to, and I just keep on coming back to this. Thoroughly recommended. Iosonouncane, because now I actually know how to pronounce it and don't do that stupid British thing of trying to pronounce it like it's an English word. Okay, we are here with Lyrica Ucraina. Now that, I believe, if my Italian is correct, and the fact that I looked it up on Google Translate earlier, haha, means Ukrainian whispers. Now this isn't really a traditional album per se, but given that Iosonouncane kind of have the top spot of my favourite albums of the decade so far, I felt it would be remiss of me to not listen to this. This is basically a soundtrack album to an independent documentary about the ongoing Ukrainian-Russian war, and given the heaviness, of course, of the particular subject material, the music reflects that. It very much feels like it's cut from a similar cloth to Era in terms of its tonality, its instrumentation, and its overall structuring and theming, but you can tell that there is a degree of extraordinary sadness behind this music. It's a very difficult listen. It's very heavy. It's very reflective of how things are at the moment in Ukraine. It's an exceptionally difficult album. It's beautiful in its own right, but it is extremely poignant as well. I can't really pinpoint any particular moments that are worth listening to, given it is mostly kind of like an ambient soundtrack, but given the subject material and how we are in the world at the moment, I do feel this is worth listening to, if only to give you some sort of perspective as to how things are at the moment. It's very deep, it's very heavy, it's an extraordinary listen and extremely humbling. Karmakanic's Transmutation. Okay, neo-prog seems to be the flavour of the day these days, as I've had quite a few sort of these kind of neo-prog albums flying around at the moment, but the latest of which is obviously Karmakanic's Transmutation. Now, it's funny that I love Karmakanic because I don't really like the Flower Kings that much, and you know, despite the obvious association between the two, one of them ticks the buttons for me, one of them doesn't. I've been really enjoying Karmakanic for a little while now. Who's the Boss in the Factory, I think, is one of the best kind of neo-prog albums that's ever been made. It's spectacular if you've never listened to it. And I've been having a really great time with Transmutation. I have been thoroughly enjoying this one. No, it's not breaking any new ground. No, it's not going to win any awards for originality. But what it is doing, it's doing very well. It is taking that neo-prog essence, that neo-prog idea, and it is running with it. It is making itself known that they are having the best time of their lives recording this. Every little bit of this record sounds fun. Everybody sounds like they're having a great time. And when it's obvious that the artist is enjoying themselves, it's hard not to feel similarly when you listen to the music. The great big epic tacked onto the end is definitely one of the better 20+ minute epics of the year. I would be very surprised if it doesn't make a resurgence in my year-end listings, of course, but anything can happen in between now and then. That being said, I've really enjoyed this one. I think Karmakanic have kind of knocked this one out of the park. It's been great to see them come back into the fold after quite a substantial absence since their last record. And yeah, I think they smashed it. I think this is a great time. I think if you enjoy neo-prog, you're going to have an amazing time with this one. If you're not so sure about neo-prog, I think it's still worth giving a go, because I feel that this is kind of the genre at its height. This is kind of the genre doing what it does best by artists who are clearly enjoying themselves. Lady Gaga with Mayhem. Yes, I am actually a very big fan of Lady Gaga. Yeah, I know, a gay man who loves Lady Gaga, big whoop. But the reality is I've been kind of, I don't know, not feeling her last couple of records. They just didn't land for me. They were kind of in one ear and out the other, and I just, I don't know. I was starting to think that maybe Gaga had lost the plot, maybe she had in fact gone Gaga. So Mayhem was kind of a nice one for me because it feels kind of like she's returning to the sound that made her really popular with things like Born This Way and The Fame Monster. She's taken those kind of elements that made those albums work, made those albums so successful, but she still managed to weave in a little bit of the things that came in after that. Ultimately, what we have here is kind of like, it kind of has like a greatest hits vibe, if that makes any sense, without it actually being a greatest hits album. It feels like you've got all these little Frankenstein parts of all the songs that kind of worked for her in the past, and she's kind of sort of jumbled them up together, produced some new songs, and called it a day. Now, this may or may not be of any interest to people watching this video. I know you're mostly here for prog rock and or metal, and I get that, but I love Gaga, and I like to talk about Gaga a little bit. There's some really great songs on here. I think the final 2-hit combo on this album, if you don't count the stupid Bruno Mars song, which just doesn't fit at all thematically on this album, but it's there for some reason, because money, I guess. But yeah, The Beast and Blade of Grass, so good, absolutely so good. They're like, especially Blade of Grass is such a great ballad. It's so powerful, it's got such incredible melodies. Gaga's voice is sumptuous throughout this entire record. I really enjoy Mayhem. I think this is a fabulous pop record, probably going to be like my pop record of the year if I was to ever make rankings like that. And yeah, I think even if you've been on the fence about Gaga, you kind of can't fault her boldness here. You can't fault her willingness to give the people what they want, but also without sacrificing any of her artistic integrity. This is a great record. I love it, and I keep listening to it. Naxatras and V. Or is it 5? Probably 5 because this is their 5th studio album. Okay, so I kind of like happened upon this one on a whim, and it was kind of really in the wake of Steven Wilson's The Overview, which I was a little bit disappointed on. This, however, is kind of ticking that music that makes you feel like you're traveling through space thing really, really well. This is funky, it's groovy, it's got all these sort of like world music influences going on every now and again, and it really does set the scene for the kind of spaced out, psychedelic, trippy rock that I love so much. It reminds me a little bit of like Slift's Ilion down there, a little back down there, but not quite as grungy or as heavy in that respect. It's a little bit more post-rock, a little bit more prog rock, but definitely still got that psychedelic space feel to it. So if, like me, you were looking for something a little bit more, I don't want to say grounded because that feels like the wrong word to use, a little bit more accessible than Steven Wilson's The Overview, but you wanted that kind of exploratory space music, then I think V by Naxatras is probably going to be one of the best experiences you have this year with that kind of music. So do check it out. And finally, we have Tiktaalika with Gods of Pangaea. Not to be mistaken for Charlie Griffiths' original debut solo album, which was called Tiktaalika, but under the Charlie Griffiths name. For his second output, he's taken that name, given it as the band name, and now we are Gods of Pangaea. Kinda like when Jeff Tate was like, I'm going to make a new band called Operation Mindcrime, but with Jeff Tate's kind of cringe, so we're just going to put him in a box over there. Charlie Griffiths, one of the guitarists from Haken, is back this time. Don't expect this to be anything like his first solo album, because there ain't nothing like it whatsoever. Tiktaalika is very much, as the name might give you a hint, given that it kind of rhymes with Metallica, it's a love letter to 80s thrash. It just is, and I am all for it because I love 80s thrash. I grew up on that. In fact, you could say without 80s thrash, I'd never have found metal, I'd never have found prog metal, I never would have started this channel. So 80s thrash is kind of responsible for all of this, dungarees and everything. So having this kind of, I don't want to say tribute album to 80s thrash, but heavily inspired by these old school greats like Metallica, Megadeth, Anthrax, you know, all these big thrash bands, all kind of like congeal together to create what is ultimately an incredibly enjoyable listen. Now, like I say, do not expect progressive metal here. This really kind of isn't. It is a lot more stripped down, a lot more focused on like simpler kind of song structures, but with complex and intricate riffs and solos that really just highlight just how good of a guitarist Charlie is. Like, my God, some of the stuff on this is just absolutely blistering. It's so much fun to listen to. I've personally been having an amazing time with this, but like I say, huge 80s thrash guys, go figure. If you are expecting more of the same on the original album of Tiktaalika, then you're just not gonna get it here, so I can imagine some people will be quite disappointed with this, but if you go into it knowing what to expect, I think you can maybe modulate your sort of like, will I or won't I like this, and you'll figure it out for yourself if this is your kind of thing or not. I personally loved it, absolutely fantastic record, definitely check it out. So, there we go. There are 10 records that I've been meaning to speak about this quarter. Now, of course, this not all of them. There's loads of albums out there that I still kind of want to talk about, and I might get around to giving some of them full reviews. They might end up never getting talked about, which is a terrible shame. I know. I can't listen to everything, I can't talk about everything. But if there are any other records from this quarter that you think I should definitely check out, please do let me know about it. I'll be putting some affiliate links down below if you're looking to buy any of these albums. Now, of course, I would encourage you to buy directly from the artist first, but if you are looking to help out the channel and help me earn a little bit of bucks that can be funneled back into the channel, then any purchases made through those affiliate links would be super helpful, guys, so I really do appreciate that. If you did make it this far, thank you very much for watching the video. I hope you do find something within here that you can enjoy, and until next time, guys, as always, keep your rhyme signatures pretty odd.